Hello, welcome to Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. I am Robert, the narrator, and thank you for joining me for another episode. This is episode 6, and will be one of my top 10 favorite RPGs of all time episodes, where I'll talk about the 10 games that were most influential to me as the RPG hobby goes. And tonight we're going to talk about game number 9 on my top 10 favorite RPGs of all time list. So why don't we jump right in and get to talking about that game? So I did number 10 a couple of episodes ago, and tonight number 9 is Star Wars Edge of the Empire, the role playing game. This is number 9 on my top 10 list. I really like this game. I am running it right now. I ran it when it came out a few years ago, and it was in beta form. And I'm really enjoying the game. And in the short time that it's been out, it has crept its way onto my top 10 list. So Star Wars Edge of the Empire role playing game by Fantasy Flight Games is my number 9. So let's get going. What drew me to Star Wars Edge of the Empire? Well, number one, I think this can go without being said. It's a Star Wars role playing game. And at the time that it came out, of course, only one company can have it. I have played almost every iteration of the Star Wars role playing game. So when I found out that Fantasy Flight Games was doing another game, I mean, hey, it's Star Wars. But a close number 2 to that reason why I was drawn to Star Wars Edge of the Empire is actually this game right here, Warhammer Fantasy Role Play 3rd Edition, also by Fantasy Flight Games. This game came out before Star Wars Edge of the Empire, and was the first game to feature Fantasy Flight Games' narrative dice system, where instead of using standard polyhedral dice, the game used very unusual dice. They were polyhedral dice, D10s, D8s, D6s, but they had symbols on them, and each die represented different things in the game. They represented whether you were in an aggressive stance or a defensive stance. It represented your attributes. It represented your skills, and it was very unique. As you can tell, this is a massive game, very heavy game, and I loved it because it was so innovative and so different from anything else I had ever played. And then after Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd Edition came out, Fantasy Flight Games announced that they had the license to make Star Wars role-playing games. And the first thing I thought when I heard that was, man, I hope they use the narrative dice system for Star Wars. That would be incredible if they used that. And lo and behold, they did. They used a variation of the narrative dice system for Star Wars Edge of the Empires and the other games. In their Star Wars line, and it was in a different form. As you can tell, this is Warhammer Fantasy Role Play. This was $100 ginormous box set that also had cards, character sheets, NPCs, standees, the narrative, the custom narrative dice, had everything in there. With Star Wars, they kind of went in a different direction. They gave you a core rule book, and you would have to go out and purchase the dice. They also did some adversary cards where you had NPCs in card form, made it easy for the GM to reference NPC stats and so forth, but they didn't give you a giant $100 book. Sorry, box set. They just gave you a really big tome here for the core rule book. So that's really what drew me to Star Wars Edge of the Empire. The fact that it was Star Wars, number one, and number two, it used the very innovative narrative dice system that Fantasy Flight Games introduced to you using Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. So that was really what drew me to the game. So what is Star Wars Edge of the Empire all about? Well, if you are watching this vlog, there's probably very little chance that you don't know what Star Wars is. Of course, it takes place in a galaxy far, far away at a time when the evil galactic empire has its clutches on almost the entire galaxy, and the galactic empire is being fought by the Rebel Alliance. A grouping, an organization of different worlds throughout the galaxy who want to fight the Empire and destroy their grip on the galaxy and bring back stability and law and justice to the galaxy. So, of course, it started with a film franchise in the 70s. It was a groundbreaking property, and even today, it is a ginormous property in role-playing games, card games, board games, all types of merchandise. Of course, has been released for Star Wars. Now, Star Wars: Edge of the Empire is part of a trilogy of role-playing games. What Fantasy Flight Games decided to do was to break the Star Wars role-playing game, into three core role-playing games. You have its first release, Star Wars: Edge of the Empire. Then you have Star Wars: Age of Rebellion and Star Wars: Force and Destiny. Edge of the Empire focused on the Han Solo, Boba Fett, Jabba the Hutt side of the Star Wars galaxy. From the original trilogy, that was the time that really there was a big focus on that part of the Star Wars galaxy, say in Return of the Jedi. You have smugglers, bounty hunters, crime lords, assassins. So it focuses on characters living out in the outer rim, struggling to survive out away from the empire, and trying to make a living on the edge as much as they can. Star Wars: Age of Rebellion, of course, focuses on the PCs being part of the Rebel Alliance. You're directly fighting the Empire and the military forces of the Rebel Alliance, and you are trying to, of course, destroy the Empire. And in Star Wars: Force and Destiny, the third and final, or maybe final, core rule book in the line, focused, of course, on the Jedi. And the game takes place in after A New Hope, after the destruction of the first Death Star, and so that's what the game is all about. And the three core rule books. I was most interested in Edge of the Empire and Force and Destiny, much less so interested in Age of Rebellion. And luckily for me, Edge of the Empire was the first core rulebook released for this trilogy of core rule books, and that really made me happy because I was really interested in portraying characters out in the outer rim, smugglers, assassins. I really kind of like that aspect of Star Wars, and that was the first core rule book that was released, and I was really happy about that. So that is what the game is all about. And now the setting itself, the essence of the setting for Edge of the Empire. As I said, the characters are the scum, if you will, of the Star Wars galaxy. You have your smugglers, your assassins. The player characters start with their own ship, and they can be in the outer rim and kind of focus on what the kind of adventures that they want to have out in the shadier part of the Star Wars galaxy. You can be mercenaries, you could be smugglers. Just to give you an idea of the different character classes of Star Wars Edge of the Empire. They call them careers, and each career has a specialization. So taking a look at the different careers that you have bounty hunter, you have colonists, you have, and I'm flipping through their specializations, you have the explorer, and you have the hired gun. Um, you have your smuggler career, of course, as you would expect. You have your technician. They fix things. You know, you have your mechanic and so forth. Um, and those are all of the different careers in Edge of the Empire. So as you can tell, yeah, the shadier part of the Star Wars galaxy, and each career has its own specializations. So you have a career that gives you a certain number of skills that you have access to, and then you can really drill down into a specialization. You know, what type of bounty hunter are you? Are you an assassin? Are you a gadgeteer? Are you a survivalist? So each career has about three specializations, and that's really what the setting of Edge of the Empire is. And I really love that gritty, shady aspect of Star Wars Edge of the Empire, and it's really fun. I'm loving the game. I'm loving having my players navigate this part of the Star Wars galaxy, and it's really a really fun game. And it's really unique. The mechanics of the game. Now that I have discussed what drew me to Star Wars Edge of the Empire, and touched on what it's about, and really what the setting is, the mechanics of the game are also part of what really drew me to the game. Now, in Star Wars Edge of the Empire, you have your abilities, which are brawn, agility, intellect, cunning, willpower, and presence, and those are generally rated from 1 to 5. And then you have your list of skills, which are also generally rated from 1 to 5. It's a pretty simple concept that you're probably used to from other games. When you want to do something, you usually pick a skill for your action that makes sense for your action, and that skill is linked to one of the 6 ability scores. Now, this is when things really start to get interesting, because that's when the narrative dice come into play. Yes, these odd looking dice, you have D8s, you have D12s, you have D6s, but if you notice, they don't have numbers on them, they have symbols. And each one of these die represent a particular aspect of your character. For instance, the green D8s represent your character's ability scores generally, you know, your brawn, intellect, cunning, and so forth. Then you have your D12s. These yellow D12s represent your character's, I guess you could say, skill. They're called proficiency dice. So if you have a skill, there's a good chance that when you do an action, these ability die are going to be changed into yellow proficiency die. Then you have other dice in the game. These purple D8s are called difficulty dice. What these dice represent is the inherent base difficulty of whatever action you're trying to perform. So the more difficult the action is, the more of these dice you'll have to roll with your die pool. Then you have some other dice. You have your setback die, which are these black D6s. These represent any environmental or situational modifiers that is working against your character. For instance, if you're trying to climb a wall and it's raining, you may have some setback dice. And then you have your blue D6s here. These are called boost die, and these represent beneficial environmental or situational modifiers. For instance, if you're trying to climb that same wall and you have a piece of equipment that's perfect for the job, you may get some boost die. And then you have your red critical die, which represents your action being really difficult, and they will change your difficulty die to these these challenge die, and they represent your action being really more difficult than normal. The base difficulty. There's another type of die in the game, another D12. These white die, these are your force die, and they're used to generate force points for your Jedi, your Force users. They're also used to generate what are called destiny points. They're basically your action points in the game. They allow players to change something about an encounter narratively. They also allow your players to change the difficulty of a task that they're attempting or that an NPC is attempting. So that's another die from this narrative dice pool. Just how you would make a basic pool. So as I said, your abilities range from 1 to 5. Generally, your skills range from 1 to 5. So whenever you want to perform a task, let's say again you're trying to climb a wall. So trying to climb a wall would be a athletics check, which is linked to your brawn. So let's say your character has a brawn of 2 and an athletics skill of 2. So essentially the way the core mechanic of the game works, the player would say, hey, I want to climb this wall. The game master says, okay, go ahead and give me an athletics check. So essentially what the player would do is say, hey, I have a brawn of 2. So you have your 2 ability die. What you do is you look at your skill and the linked attribute, and the one that is the higher gives you your ability dice. So since you have both of them are the same, you would have 2 ability die. Then you look at the stat that is lower, either the skill or the ability, and for that number, you convert each ability die into a proficiency die. So since your ability is 2 and your skill is 2, both of those die get converted into proficiency die, showing that you have some skill with that ability. Now, your GM may say, hey, this is a pretty average wall to climb. So I'm going to say that that is a difficulty of easy. So that's 1 difficulty die. Remember I said that it was raining outside, so the wall is a little slippery. That gives you 1 setback die. And then, you know what, you did have that climbing gear, so I'm going to go ahead and give you a bonus die because you have the right equipment for the job. Essentially what happens is you formed your die pool here, you roll it up, and symbols pop up on the dice. Now, there are several types of symbols. Essentially, you have your, this little explosion here is a success symbol. You have your little 3-pointed star here, that's a failure symbol. The core mechanic of this die pool is failures cancel out successes. After accounting for all of your failures and successes, if you have any successes left, you're successful. It's fairly simple. So these little stars are canceled out by these little three-pointed stars, or these triangles. They're failures. And if you have any of the stars left after that calculation, your action is successful. Now, this is where the game, I think, is really innovative and really cool, because unlike most games, you don't just have a binary pass-fail mechanic as you roll, oh, I hit, or you didn't hit, and that's the end of it, because you also have what is called advantage and threat. This symbol right here is the advantage symbol, and this symbol right here is the threat symbol. So just like success and failure, advantage and threat also cancel each other out. And after making that calculation, if you have any advantages left over, something good happens for your character, or if you have, excuse me, any threats left over, something bad happens. So as you probably can figure out, with any given die pool roll, you can have a successful action, so your character climbs the wall successfully, but have something bad happen to them, or they can fail their roll and have something good happen to them. So it's really a fantastic way for the players and the GM to narrate adventures, to narrate actions, so that it's more deep than I hit or I didn't hit, or I climbed the wall or I didn't climb the wall, because every roll you can explain why you succeeded or failed and what happens despite the fact that you succeeded or failed. So for this particular roll, I don't know if you can see it, but I basically rolled no failures and no successes. So that means since I don't have any successes, I failed the roll, and I also rolled one advantage and one threat. So they cancel each other out. So this was a failure that had nothing particularly bad happen other than the fact that the character was unable to climb the wall. So that is the core mechanic of Star Wars Edge of the Empire. And I just find that a really stimulating mechanic, really gets my imagination going. And for anyone who has any interest in making the game more interesting than just roll the die, hit, and keep it moving, I think this system is really great. Some of my players, some of the guys that were in my Star Wars game and did the beta, really didn't enjoy the narrative dice system. They picked it up fairly easily, which I would always kind of rib them that they would talk about how incredibly complex the game was, but they picked up the mechanic really easily. It's kind of funny. As I said, I ran the beta for my friends when the beta rulebook was out, before the complete core rulebook came out. They really didn't enjoy it. But when the full core rulebook came out, they decided that they wanted to give it another chance. And on our first meeting for the game, I was explaining the rules to them, and they stopped me in the middle and were like, "Hey, I remember the rules. That's really complex game that." Oh yeah, I got it. I got the rules. So in the midst of complaining about how super complex the game was, they remembered the rules just like that. So I thought that was really funny. But I think what it was is that, not what they were saying is not that it was complex or convoluted, but it's just not their style. It's a system that's easy to pick up on in a couple of minutes, but for some of them, the having a mechanic any more intricate than roll a die, add a number to it, was just not their style. So I'm still running right now with with pretty much the core group. Some players have, excuse me, has swapped out, but I'm still running it and really enjoying the game. Um, Damage in the game is static, so that when you hit, weapons do a fixed amount of damage. For instance, a blaster carbine does 9 points of damage. Your damage is reduced by your armor, and you apply the remaining damage to your wound threshold for weapons that are able to kill characters. And you have basically two health tracks. You have your wounds, which is a physical damage that can kill your character, and you have strain, which can be physical damage, which is not necessarily like threatening, or also it acts as as mental fatigue. What I find is that the game can be really deadly if characters are not prepared. And usually, I don't like games that are um, really that deadly, where two two or three hits can put a character out of the game. But usually, if a character is taken out of combat, it's really hard to kill them. So characters can drop really easily, but it's really hard to kill a character. You have to roll on a critical hit table, and I've always loved the critical hit tables for the Fantasy Flight role-playing games. Jay Little was the designer for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and Star Wars Edge of the Empire. And both systems have critical hit tables, and I love the critical hit tables that they that they use. You know, it really is gives you a narrative feel for the game. It really makes the game realistic, unlike some games that just have, you know, hit points, and once your hit points reach zero, you're out of combat. I think the critical hit tables really adds some fun to the game, and I've always loved those. Another mechanic that Jay Little added to Star Wars Edge of the Empire game is a group mechanic called obligation. Of course, when you're in the outer rim and you're on the shadier side of the Star Wars galaxy, you have to deal with some shady characters, maybe to get a piece of equipment that you need, or maybe you were betrayed by a friend or a former ally, or maybe you have a bounty on your head, or the ship that your crew is using, you still owe money to a hut for your ship. And the obligation mechanic is basically a threshold from 0 to 100 of how much your group owes, or how much trouble in the outer rim your group is in. And every session, the GM rolls on that threshold of 0 to 100. And if you roll within the group's obligation, whoever's obligation is rolled on that within that threshold, that obligation comes back to haunt them. Like maybe the hut who loaned you credits for your ship says, "Hey guys, you remember you owe me credits for that ship, right?" So he starts to make trouble for your crew. It's fantastic. It's something that Jay Little seems to do with all of his recent games, where you have everybody, of course, is playing their own character, but there is also a group mechanic which kind of brings everybody together, and I find that really fun. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has actually a group character sheet. So not only do the players have their own characters, but the group is also a character. And you have a few different group archetypes, and you choose what type of party your group is. And then there are mechanics that your party shares based on the type of group you are. So it kind of gives cohesion to your group, and I've never really seen that in any other system before, where your party is a character in the game as well. And I really like that. It gives the feeling of belonging, I think, to the PCs, and they brought that over to Star Wars Edge of the Empire, and the other two games in the Star Wars line also uses mechanics very similar to obligation that you have in Star Wars Edge of the Empire. So that's the reason why Star Wars Edge of the Empire by Fantasy Flight Games is my number 9 favorite RPG of all time. It's Star Wars. It is innovative. And it's just so different from anything that I have ever played before. If you can give me something that's not like anything else I've ever played before, you as a game designer have gone a long way to making me, Robert the Narrator, very interested in your game. So thank you very much for joining me for another episode of Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. And I hope that you're enjoying the episodes, and I hope that you'll join me for another. And I'll just say good morning or good evening wherever you are. Thank you very much.